As an occupational therapist, I've worked with and learned from a lot of stroke survivors. Unfortunately, I've seen too many survivors go home without the therapy or resources they need for recovery. Here's what I wish I could tell every stroke survivor. The first thing is that stroke recovery does not stop after the first year. Unfortunately, this myth continues to be perpetuated, and I think one of the reasons is that we see the fastest amount of recovery happening in that first 3 to 6 months after the stroke. And the reason is our brain's neuroplastic ability, or its ability to adapt and change, is at an all-time high during that time period. So you see the fastest amount of recovery then. But what you have to know is that recovery doesn't stop after that point, it just slows down. Research has come out in recent years, and I have heard anecdotally from many stroke survivors that you can continue to make progress 5, 10, 15 plus years after your stroke. The caveat here is that you have to put in the work in order to see the progress. Another piece of advice is that the time it takes to recover is incredibly variable between stroke survivors. Someone may be back at work 6 weeks after their stroke, while for others it is going to be a lifetime journey of recovery. It depends on a lot of different factors, including where in the brain the stroke happened, how severe the stroke was, how fast someone got access to care, and if they got rehab after their stroke, and what their health was like even before their stroke. And on a similar note here, try not to compare yourself to other survivors. Because strokes impact people so differently, comparing yourself can sometimes be detrimental. You may look at someone else who is also a year out from their stroke, and perhaps they're doing a lot more than you. But because strokes do impact people so differently, everyone is going to experience that recovery journey differently. I also want you to know that currently, the best tool that we have for stroke recovery is neuroplasticity. And like I mentioned before, neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to adapt and change. And what research has found is that our brain is capable of this at any age, although it slows as we get older. There's a 2008 article by Kleiman Jones which outlines the principles of neuroplasticity, and that's what we typically utilize when we're making recommendations for stroke recovery. One of the most prominent principles of neuroplasticity that you've probably heard before is use it or lose it, which basically means use the abilities that you have so that your brain prioritizes those pathways. When we stop using, say, for example, the affected side, our brain tends to prune those pathways away and stops prioritizing them. On a similar note, it's important to also avoid learned non-use. And this is where you learn not to use your affected side because it may just be easier and faster to use the abilities that are stronger. But this is really important because, like I mentioned, the brain prioritizes pathways that are used often. But I also hear from people, Elise, I don't have any movement in that affected side, so how can I avoid learned non-use? Well, you can start at a point where you're doing things like mirror therapy, mental practice, and active visualization. These are all evidence-based strategies that you can utilize even if you don't have movement in your affected side. I will link to a few videos where I go through some of those exercises and activities. In addition to neuroplasticity, there are 2 other tools that are absolutely vital to stroke recovery, and they are hope and patience. Hope is incredibly important on the recovery journey because without it, why would we keep trying? Why would we keep pressing forward and looking for more progress? And at the end of the day, no one can tell you how much progress you're going to make. If you keep trying and putting effort into your recovery journey, progress is always possible. It is normal to have setbacks, and that's why patience is equally as important. It's really hard because your brain and your body are sort of on this opposing timeline where you may feel ready to do more, but your brain is still healing. And so movement and different abilities are very slow to come back. So both hope and patience are absolutely crucial. And that's why setting goals is so important, because they allow you to track your progress, even when some of that progress seems very incremental. You can set both short-term and long-term goals, and you want to make sure that they are very specific, measurable, that they're actually achievable and realistic, and that you give yourself a time frame that you're trying to shoot for. You may not always meet that, but it gives you something to look to as you're trying to work towards those goals. I also want you to know that life will probably be different. You will probably be different. Having any type of major health event like a stroke is a trauma, and it's normal to go through the stages of grief where you maybe experience denial, anger, depression, and hopefully eventually acceptance, although it's very normal to bounce back and forth between those different stages. And while it's most common that physical symptoms of stroke are treated, mental health changes are absolutely common and normal after a stroke. Around 25 to 30% of stroke survivors experience anxiety and depression, but unfortunately, it's not usually well treated. So it's important to watch out for signs and symptoms of mental health changes and to reach out for help if you think you need it. Make your health a priority. You truly deserve to focus in on yourself and be the happiest, healthiest version of yourself that you can be. We know that up to 80% of strokes are preventable per the CDC, and you may feel fearful and anxious about having another stroke after the first one. This is a very valid and common concern. So control what you can. Look at those lifestyle factors. Are you eating a healthy and nutritious diet most of the time? Are you getting enough movement during the day? And are you taking the medications you need to take to, for example, keep your blood pressure under control or keep your cholesterol at a healthy level? Are you getting enough sleep at night? And speaking of sleep, or perhaps not getting enough sleep, I want you to know that neurofatigue is not like regular fatigue. And if you experience it, you probably already know this. But I just want to validate that you are not lazy. Neurofatigue is completely overwhelming and can feel like pure and utter exhaustion. It might feel like your limbs are injected with concrete or that you're moving through jello. I highly recommend, if you have people in your life who don't understand the experience of neurofatigue, that you share this video I made a while ago about neurofatigue and spoon theory. This may help them to have a better understanding of what you're going through. And I'm sure that this isn't news to you, but you will find out who your real friends are after your stroke. There will be those who are there for you every step of the way, calling to check on you, taking you to doctor's appointments, bringing groceries to your house. And there will be those who just don't follow up at all and act like they've just fallen off the face of the planet. Hang on to those who are good to you. They are real, true friends, and try your best to let go of the ones who weren't there for you. And my last piece of advice, but certainly not least, is to advocate for yourself. And if you're not able to do that, have someone you trust advocate for you. For example, if you're just out of the hospital after your stroke, advocate for a neurology consult, for lab work, for diagnostic testing if you weren't able to find out what was actually going on in the hospital. Advocate for rehab or for continued therapy if they're trying to discharge you. If your therapist is trying to discharge you from therapy, ask them why. If you don't feel ready for it, you can have that open conversation and try to get continued therapy. If insurance is trying to deny you more therapy, ask your therapist to write you a letter of medical necessity to try to extend it. If you don't get along with your therapist, you can always ask to work with another one. That's perfectly acceptable. And if you're experiencing mental health changes after your stroke, please advocate for care that you need. Your mental health is just as important as your physical health. You deserve to be cared for just as much as anybody else. All right, everyone, that's it for today. Leave me a comment and let me know, what was some of the best advice that you got after your stroke? And I'm going to be leaving a link to a few of my videos, including what does better look like after a stroke and how long is stroke recovery. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to give it a like. And if you're new here, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notifications on when I post new videos. Post-Stroke is a nonprofit, and you can help us keep our content free, either by giving us a super thanks by clicking in the YouTube bar below, by giving us a one-time donation via PayPal, or by becoming a Patreon member, where you get access to cool perks like behind-the-scenes footage and even YouTube shoutouts, of which I have some today. And a special thanks to Heather G and our Empowerer tier. We can't do what we do without you all. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.